A Love of the Library by Everett Cole. The clatter of hooves echoed on the cobblestone streets of New Haven, Connecticut, as the early morning mist curled lazily around the lampposts. Annabelle Hart adjusted her bonnet and pulled her shawl tighter against the brisk autumn wind. She had never cared much for cold mornings, but the prospect of beginning her new position at the New Haven Library lifted her spirits. Annabelle was not a woman of means. Her father, a shipbuilder, had perished in a sudden storm at sea 2 years prior, leaving Annabelle and her younger brother to fend for themselves. But she had determination, a sharp mind, and a love for books that knew no bounds. When the opportunity to work at the library arose, she seized it with fervor. The library itself was a grand structure of red brick and ivy-covered walls. Its arched windows gleamed with the promise of countless adventures tucked between the pages of old tomes. Inside, the scent of aged paper and varnished wood welcomed her like an old friend. "Miss Hart, I presume?" came a deep voice, startling her from her admiration of the space. Annabelle turned to face a tall man with dark hair and piercing green eyes. He was dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit, his posture straight yet unassuming. "Yes, I'm Annabelle Hart. And you are?" "William Chambers," he said with a courteous bow. "Assistant curator. I'll be overseeing your work." Though his tone was formal, Annabelle caught a glimmer of warmth in his eyes, as though he struggled to maintain a professional air. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Chambers," she replied, offering a polite smile. Days at the library were a whirl of activity. Annabelle dived headfirst into her duties, sorting through dusty manuscripts, cataloging new arrivals, and ensuring the shelves were always in proper order. William, though reserved, often lingered nearby, offering guidance when necessary. Annabelle quickly learned that beneath William's composed exterior lay a quick wit and an insatiable curiosity. Their conversations often meandered far from the topic of library records, delving into literature, philosophy, and even the occasional jest. "You've a sharp tongue for someone so young," William remarked one afternoon as Annabelle teased him about his fondness for Byron. "And you've an old soul for someone so, well, stiff," Annabelle quipped, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Their laughter echoed through the quiet halls, earning disapproving glances from a few elderly patrons. By the time winter descended upon New Haven, the library staff had begun to take notice of the pair's growing camaraderie. Whispers circulated among the clerks about the assistant curator's newfound liveliness and the spirited young woman who had seemingly inspired it. "Careful, Miss Hart," teased Sarah, a fellow worker and Annabelle's closest friend at the library. "People are beginning to think Mr. Chambers has a soft spot for you." Annabelle flushed but dismissed the notion with a wave of her hand. "He's simply kind, and we share an appreciation for good literature, nothing more." But late at night, as snow fell gently outside her modest boarding house, Annabelle couldn't help but wonder. Did William's lingering glances mean something more? Did the way his voice softened when he spoke her name hint at feelings he dared not express? One icy morning, Annabelle arrived at the library to find William pacing near the front desk, a furrow etched deeply into his brow. "Is something amiss?" she asked, placing a hand gently on the desk to steady herself against the cold draft. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "The library's finances have been mismanaged. There's talk of layoffs." Annabelle's heart sank. Though she earned little, the job was her lifeline and her passion. "Do you think they'll let me go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. William stopped pacing and turned to face her fully. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. "You're one of the finest workers here, Annabelle. I'll speak to the board myself if necessary." His words were a comfort, though they did little to quell the anxiety that gripped her. Over the following weeks, William became a steady presence in Annabelle's life. He offered reassurances when she felt disheartened and found small ways to lift her spirits, slipping a freshly baked scone onto her desk or leaving a note with a particularly moving passage from her favorite book. One evening, as the library closed and snow blanketed the city, William walked Annabelle home. Their footsteps crunched softly in the fresh powder, and their breaths mingled in the cold air. "Why do you care so much?" Annabelle asked suddenly, her voice tinged with both curiosity and vulnerability. William paused, the light from a nearby lamppost casting a golden glow over his face. "Because you remind me of what it means to love one's work and one's life," he admitted. "You've brought something to this place that I didn't realize it lacked." Annabelle's cheeks burned, though whether from the cold or his words, she wasn't sure. As spring approached, news arrived that a prominent library in Boston was seeking a new head employee. The position promised higher pay and greater prestige, and Annabelle's name was quickly suggested. "You should apply," William said when he heard the news. Though his voice was steady, There was a shadow of reluctance in his eyes. "Do you think I should leave New Haven?" she asked, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. "I think," he paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "I think you deserve every opportunity to flourish. But I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't miss you." Annabelle felt her heart twist. The idea of leaving the library and William was almost unthinkable. Yet the chance to carve out a better future for herself and her brother was too great to ignore. The weeks that followed were fraught with uncertainty. Annabelle sent her application to Boston but wrestled with doubts about whether she truly wanted to leave. Meanwhile, William grew more distant, as though preparing himself for her departure. One fateful evening, as rain pelted against the library's windows, Annabelle found William in the reading room, his head bowed over a book he seemed unable to focus on. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. William looked up, his expression unreadable. "I'm staying," she continued. "Boston may offer more, but it could never offer this. I could never leave what I've found here." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the patter of rain. Then, in an uncharacteristic display of emotion, William rose and closed the distance between them. "Annabelle," he murmured, his voice thick with relief. "You have no idea what it means to hear that." Their eyes met, and in that instant, the unspoken feelings that had simmered for months finally came to light. William reached for her hand, and Annabelle allowed herself to hope, for the first time, that she had found not just a place to belong but a partner to share it with. Spring blossomed in New Haven, and with it came a renewed sense of purpose for Annabelle and William. The library survived its financial troubles, thanks in part to William's careful advocacy, and Annabelle found herself more content than she ever thought possible. Their partnership grew, both professionally and personally. Together, they organized literary events that drew scholars and readers from across the region, transforming the library into a vibrant hub of culture. And as they walked home each evening, hand in hand, Annabelle often marveled at how far she had come, from the daughter of a shipbuilder to a woman who had not only found her place in the world, but also someone to share it with. Years later, when their children played among the stacks of books that had brought them together, Annabelle and William often reflected on the journey that had begun on that crisp autumn morning. Their love was not one born of grand gestures or dramatic declarations but of shared passions, quiet moments, and the unwavering belief that together they could weather any storm. And in the pages of their story, they found a happiness that rivaled even the most romantic of novels.